How you doing? Welcome back to the Philippines. Today we're going to talk about going broke in the Philippines, or for any country for that matter. I guess the best way to talk about this is to tell my story of what happened to me. So, flashback quite a few years ago, I had been kind of bouncing back and forth from San Diego and Las Vegas, and really didn't have a place to live. On the weekends, I had been going over to Tijuana, staying at this place that I liked. It was next to the beach, and it was next to Starbucks. I used to go over there on, say, Thursday and leave on like Tuesday, maybe closer to Monday night at about midnight, because the line was easy to cross, and basically hang out there and do my work and stuff, and then from that point either travel up to Las Vegas, because California frankly was expensive, but I still have a lot of friends in Southern California, so I couch surf down there, and that had been my routine, was to basically go up to Vegas. I was dealing poker and dice at the time, and get my paycheck dealing poker and dice, what's known as extra board in Las Vegas, meaning that as needed or on call basis, which I would call the few casinos I was on extra board, try to get some schedule together and then go up there, work, and then circle back to Southern California, which ultimately Thursday night I would mosey on down to Tijuana. And I liked this routine. It was kind of nice. And then I met a fella named Raphael sitting in Starbucks having trouble getting on the internet. I was pretty new to Tijuana. I thought about living there, right? But I still kind of felt this need to leave, this tie to Southern California, Nevada. It was like pulling me. I don't know how much need there was to cross. I worked online, but again, like I said, I still had a foot in Las Vegas, had my gaming license, and I would deal extra board there, and for maybe not a lot of money, but it was something to do, and so that was my routine. Then once I met Raphael, he told me about a place he was staying where I could stay at this motel for $300 a month, and I was like, no kidding, huh? He said, yeah, I was safe, and leave my stuff in the room and no one would ever mess with it, and that was pretty key, because probably like you, most foreign countries, I wouldn't really say they're dangerous, but you're definitely open to some problems, and I was nervous about that, being new to the foreign country game. More than anything, I just love the beach and the weather in San Diego, and I really didn't like the heat in the Las Vegas, so it was a nice relief, especially in the winter months. So anyway, picking up the story, I decided to go over there and rent a month, and I remember kind of telling myself, I was like, I need to try this out and find out what it's like to stay out of the country a whole month, and see how I do, track my earnings, track my expenses, try to get an idea of what this was going to cost me, and see if I could do it, a feasibility project, if you will. And it went pretty good, honestly, and actually from that month I ended up just basically staying for 4 months without crossing, and I was like, hey, this is pretty easy. So That led to about 9 months till I met my landlord, Diego. And Diego, of course, was a little bit familiar with me because the Playas Tijuana area is pretty tight place. I mean, you start to know people in the area, and you get to know the people crossing and all that stuff, and you get to pick up with some of the locals. And so, of course, being 6'4" foreigner down there, I started to get to know some people. And Diego told me about his apartment that he had for rent. I'm guessing that Diego knew the the motel I was staying at, and he offered me his apartment, which was for 3,000 pesos at the time. It was a 2-bedroom apartment. This place really goes down as probably the best place I've lived in my whole life. I still, at least a little bit, feel like it was a mistake letting this place go for several months and maybe even years after leaving. I really regret it because, 3,000 pesos at the time was about maybe $170 a month. And I had my expenses right about where I wanted. The expenses in the United States, when you do this, I mean, you're always going to have some bills in the United States. I mean, that is really maybe the thing that I don't think anybody really considers. I had a storage unit, which over time I actually moved it closer to the line, and because I wanted better access to some of my stuff, which actually led to me bringing it to Mexico, which I then had to pack it out over the course of some crossing trips of the stuff that I felt like I wanted to keep versus the stuff I was ready to leave behind. And I ended up staying in that apartment for several years. Again, really feeling like that place was one of the best places I lived, believe it or not. Safe, reasonably quiet. Across the street from Jenny's Tortillas, probably the best tortilla place in the world, honestly. But that leads me to the point of this story is at one point I really just got kind of broke. Normally, like, you're not going to end up coming to Philippines, Tijuana, wherever you're headed to, and go broke, because I mean, really only a small percentage of people stay. Either they come to a place and they're like, hey, holy shit, I really like it here, and end up staying kind of unplanned. Maybe you find a companion or something, and you end up really liking it, and you end up staying maybe for longer than again originally planned. Or B, you kind of organize your life and basically go for long term. And so the thing to be careful about is, as the timeline goes out long enough, this is the danger zone. Because really, if you just go for a month or two, you might end up getting broke, but you're not going to experience once you've established yourself in a new place. The return to the United States for me, kind of circling back to the story, was challenging. Searching for a place to live. Of course, I could look online and stuff like that, but talking to landlords, getting in front of people, negotiating, coordinating, my license being expired, my passport. Actually, at that point, I had my passport stolen, because my van was stolen while I was in Tijuana, and complications that really were facing me for my return. I mean, I had some help from a friend of mine, Ben, who's a teacher in Las Vegas, kind of wink, wink, rented me a room. Hey, you could crash here for like $100 a week. And me being a contractor in a past life, I helped him out with some repairs and stuff, and it really helped me get my car back registered and you know, insurance. I mean, really, it's difficult to really wrap your mind around when you're established in the United States, and then you abandon that, and then you again have to reestablish yourself in the United States, and the cost involved. Oftentimes, even people that I met in Tijuana, which were unable to return to the United States, frankly, because either they were trying to save up the money, and just a couple $100, like even here in the Philippines, if I went broke per se, you know, $300 or $400 probably lasts me like a month. I could rent a place for a month. I could even rent a bunk bed for like $50 a month and live on you know, street food for $1, $2. So it'd really hold me over. Whereas the return to the United States, of course, would take immigration, airline tickets, transportation, you know, just the, you know, the expenses really start to pile up very quickly. And I could really only imagine during this situation with the inflation rising that that cost is really going up in a major way. And there's been a few stories online, none of which I'm really going to reference, but it seems to be a hot topic because of people working remotely and interested in living in other countries. This feels, going broke in another country feels more threatening than it actually is. Again, like I said, if you remember, I talked about even a few $100s would probably hold me over in the Philippines, in Tijuana, most foreign countries I've been to. Again, because you're established. I mean, I could take a tricycle for $1 or $2, get a coffee for 50 cents. You could really live for such a small amount of money, where in the United States that just doesn't exist, frankly. And there is like levels of living too, right? Because like I could probably, in Tijuana, I had several friends where I could probably stay at their house for free, where that probably wouldn't even exist in the United States, really. A friend of mine that I kind of stayed at his house back before I moved to Tijuana was renting me the room for like $900 a month. And I mean, really, just because the costs in the area, not that he wouldn't help me out per se, but my point really is that it would be much easier to get along in a foreign country versus returning to the United States. And the other point that I like to bring up to people, because again, I get asked this question frequently, and now that I've experienced having to reestablish myself as a foreigner in the United States, because that's really what it amounted to at the time, was that when you try to take and re-enter, it is always important to have a amount of money, of course, right? I mean, everybody talks about that, but when you're here in the foreign country, like I was in Tijuana, I had a little money set aside, and of course, and basically kind of held on to that, but also over time I whittled it away. And this same threat really is facing even people on retirements and stuff, because really, if you move out of the United States on a retirement, even a small retirement or Social Security or whatnot, and then you come here, you pulling up the money to come here, which in most cases is much easier than to go home, right? So you often will find yourself that even here in the Philippines, maybe you're not that broke, but you can't front up the money for an airline ticket and all the expenses that would be involved in returning to home. So oftentimes these people are trapped in these places. The other thing I'd like to add to that is you never are really as trapped as you feel that you are. I learned a lot from my experiences living in foreign countries. A lot of people panic. Look around you. There's people living right next to you, and it's not as scary as it feels. The main scary part, I believe, is that once you feel like you're ready to go home and done with whatever you're doing, and you will return home at some point. I mean, even as I'm making this video, whatever that time frame is that I return home, under whatever pretense it is, being I've gone broke, need to deal with whatever issue, that it's important to understand that you planned to be here, and it took some time, and it will often take some time to plan for your return. And I think many people panic because it feels paralyzing, and to some degree feels like you're trapped. I remember it was a friend of mine, Tijuana, used to bring me coffee and hang out with me. Her name was Alma. Some amazing tattoo work on her arms and stuff, of Day of the Dead. And she, I remember, because this was the turning point where I was done with Tijuana, and I knew I was going to return home to the United States pretty short time later. She says, "What are you doing here?" And it really kind of hit me at that point. Living in other countries, the fast and furious pace that exists in the United States, that I believe that probably most people in the United States really experience, really doesn't exist in other countries. And that can be a little bit hard to deal with for Americans. The time frame in their minds and stuff are so rapid and stuff like that. Always needing something immediately doesn't exist. Time really slows down in Mexico, and definitely takes and changes you the longer you stay there. Just like here in the Philippines. But that's my story. Going broke in a foreign country, and surviving it. And the best thing I could say as advice is, no matter where you are, you're exactly where you're at. I mean, that's no doubt about it. You really need to look around and ask yourself what you're doing and where you want to go. And I think that will put things in perspective for you. Who knows if that made any sense, but I really appreciate you guys watching. Have a wonderful, geez, I almost couldn't tell you what day it is. Thursday. See you on the next video.